There's an element of risk of being an entrepreneur. There's an element of going into the unknown, and also there's the element like self-reliance.
They're sort of on the outside or they don't really fit in. It's great. Just embrace that. Like, you don't have to fit the rules.
There's a whole generation of people who were given iPhones, given tablets, given technology, and were to figure this out. And there's another older generation that were given this technology and they were given a manual and a booklet, and they were told that the only way you could work it out is by being taught. I think an early stage founder with a freelancer could be a match made in heaven.
Show me the Figma, show me the GitHub. Like,
Yep.
if you show me those two things and you can talk and walk me through it, I'm all set. Let's start working together.
Yeah.
Hey, Andy.
Kyle,
How you doing?
how are you doing? I'm doing good,
Good,
thanks.
good.
Sorry I'm a few minutes late. I was having a few weird problems with my camera, but I think it's all sorted now. I can see you, you can see me. Hopefully it will be recording. I can see something's uploading, so that's a good start. So yeah, I'm
Yeah,
doing well, thanks.
amazing. Well, thanks for taking the time and for coming on. I'm excited you're here. I think from a design perspective, also, I've talked to a lot of founders recently, but we I haven't had a lot of good design chats. So I'm excited to dive into that as well.
Brilliant. Well, yeah, this is stuff I love. I've been doing this stuff for 20, 30 years. I love bringing kind of founders and designers together, and obviously in the pursuit of brilliant products and product market fit. And so if I can inspire a few of your listeners to go and lean into the design world a little bit more, then yeah, my job's done.
Oh my gosh. And design is close to my heart. I was at Fjord for a while. I've been
Mm.
in the agency world for a while, but Fjord was one of those pivotal moments where it was sort of like, it's less about pretty comps and more sort of like, why do you need this?
Yep.
Does the user need this? And just like really getting steeped in CX. And I just love that. That it's almost like trying to take a client from what are your priorities and what are your budgets and what are your goals, and going all the way out, and then starting from the outside and being like, what does John or Sue need? And then let's work backwards, which I love.
I'm very
Um,
familiar with the Fjord story. I knew them when they were like a 20, 30 person team before the sale and the scale and all that kind of stuff. So I have a good feeling that we're probably on a similar wavelength there. So
uh,
so I'm in your hands. So
yeah, let's do it. I
okay.
think I'd love to
The,
almost start like,
oh,
but
sorry, Kyle.
yeah,
Really quickly, one last thing.
yeah.
One thing I've realized is for some reason I've got camo camera on, which I don't normally use, but it's throwing a little kind of icon in the bottom of the screen, which is not great. Do you want me to
I
try
don't
and like
I don't see it. Let me see if I can let me see if I can tell if you oh, I see that. I see that. I mean, your call. I mean, either way. It's fine.
let me just see if I can switch to a different camera and see if that fucks things up.
Yeah.
So it'll be the
Let's
same
try it.
camera, it's just not going through software. So before we start recording,
Yeah.
let me just switch over, see if this does the trick. It's not liking switching camera, so we'll just have to deal with the watermark.
All good. All good. Um Amazing. Well, I think, I'm really interested in is going back prior to from the zero to perspective. When I started my company, I had this idea that I like the idea of zero to one, and I love the book and the philosophy. What's interesting is I feel like when you start on this journey, um, w- one is at a small scale or a large scale, what does it feel like when you sort of hit these levels, and
Mm.
are you there yet? Have you achieved it? Or does it sort of keep the ball moving? And so I think as we sort of before we dive into sort of your entrepreneurial history, and as a founder, and as a design leader, and then into the world of investing in VC and coaching, prior to that, like, whether it be at university, or did you sort of, what was your upbringing and family and environment or personality that you think sort of might have led you towards becoming a founder or the entrepreneurial journey?
Happy to give that a go. So yeah, happy to dive in. So yeah, I assume with the we're chatting now, this isn't the podcast, so I'll let you kind of
No, no, no.
no,
This is it. This is it.
this is
We're in it. Yeah. I love just diving into the, like, just having a conversation back and forth, and I less like the sort of the second question that I
ah.
have for you is, yeah, let's just chat.
Well, I just jump into my founder story. I mean, I guess I so I don't know how relevant this is, but when I was sort of young, I was sort of diagnosed with dyslexia, and it turns out in later life, a lot of kids that had dyslexia are sort of drawn into entrepreneurship. So what dyslexia tends to be is people that have dyslexia tend to be pretty smart. They tend to be really good at science, to be really good at maths. They tend to struggle a little bit with the written word and language. And so what often happens is they're poorly served at school. A lot of the time,
Mhm.
teachers don't have time for them. Often teachers think they're stupid when they're not. I think a lot of kids like this sometimes have a little bit of attention problems because their brain is like, 6 months or a year ahead of class. And so, a lot of the time I'll be sitting there just kind of bored because I've done the work. I've done, I knew what was going on. And, I was maybe a little bit of a difficult kid to handle. And so a lot of kids like this gonna get left behind, and so they find that academia isn't really their route, but, entrepreneurship is. One of the classic examples is Richard Branson. Like, a lot of people have different views of Richard Branson, but he was somebody who was incredibly smart, incredibly driven. Academia failed him, but that threw him into a kind of an independent, desire to be an entrepreneur, and so I think that's probably partly where it comes from, a sense of, I don't necessarily trust in the school to look after me, so I need to kind of make my own way. I need to kind of figure something out myself. Now, luckily, I was pretty academic. I went and did engineering at university. Um, I was, my interest in computers stemmed from being a kid. In the UK, we had this sort of program called the BBC Micro, which was one of the first computers around. They put it into schools all around the country to encourage people to program because, for some reason, back in the sort of the 80s, people realized that computers would be the future and program would be a good thing. So while all of my friends were running around outside playing football, I was inside with a couple of my other nerdy friends making a little kind of drawing turtle move around on a bit of paper. I was also
Yeah.
playing Dungeons and Dragons. Basically I was the archetypical kind of Stranger Things kind of group of kids. Um I got a Spectrum. A Spectrum was one of the first kind of home computers. In the US you had Commodores and various other things,
Mhm.
and Amigas. I had a little kind of Spectrum rubber keyboard, and I would, you know, type out games that were in magazines. This is showing how old I am. I'd buy a Spectrum magazine, there'd be a little game, I'd type it out, I'd get, semicolon in the wrong place and it would all break. And but that was how I got into computers. I didn't know what I wanted to do for a career, so I went off traveling. I discovered the internet while I was away. I met this guy in a hostel in Singapore, and he seemed like he had a bunch of money. And I was like, "How do you travel?" And he was like, "Well, I do this thing called HTML. It's really easy. Any idiot could do it. I work in London for 6 months and I travel for 6 months. I'm like, I want some of that." And so I came back to the UK. I bought a little 486 computer. I would sit in my local kind of Borders coffee shop and read all the books for free, and basically somehow managed to kind of start doing design work. And I did one project, two project, five projects. I had a little bit of time in an agency, and then I decided to kind of set out on my own. So I founded what was arguably the first UX agency in the UK called Clear Left. I ran that for 15 years. We were really well known. We ran conferences all over the world. I spoke at conferences all over the world. I got to meet Marty, who was one of your previous guests at South by Southwest. Through this, I've met several of your other guests through my travel and my speaking, and I just love it. I love building something from nothing. I love There's an element of risk in being an entrepreneur. There's an element
Yeah.
of going into the unknown, and also there's the element, like I sort of said before, of like self-reliance. Like, you're not putting all your eggs in somebody else's basket. You either succeed or fail, and you succeed or fail kind of on your own terms. And so I
Right.
like that about it. Like, weirdly, a lot of my hobbies are in that space as well. Like, I two of my hobbies, I'm a cave diver and I'm a pilot.
Oh,
And both of
nice.
those hobbies are kind of like, they're risky hobbies, but they're
Yep.
not risky if you are in control. Like, if
Right.
you're managing the risks, if something goes wrong in a cockpit, you're the one that's got to sort it out. If something goes wrong in a cave underground, you've got to sort it out. And so you have to have real confidence in your own problem solving ability. You're not just throwing up your hands and saying, I can't deal with this, it's somebody else's problem. And so there's just something about my character, my nature, that really, really draws me to sort of that entrepreneurship journey. For the purpose of the audiences, I don't do that anymore. But what I do now, like, I've run a few startups and I've run my agency, but now I work in the VC space helping other entrepreneurs. And I love that now, being able to kind of pay it forward and help all these amazing, young, enthusiastic kind of founders benefit from my experience and help them, on their journey. And through doing that, if I'm just an entrepreneur, I can start one, two, three businesses. But now I can have
Right.
a thumbprints on 10, 20, 30, 40 businesses. And so I love it.
That's amazing. There's a couple of things I'd love to unpack. One, I can very much relate with the as a neurodivergent ADHD. Like I had the exact same path. I'm sitting in Spanish class as a freshman, and I'm just like, I don't want to repeat these words back to you. I wish I was home messing with my computer and like taking it apart and like learning how it works and breaking it and getting a new one. And and I think there's something to that. Like it's also nice to be able to share with others that if they feel like they're sort of on the outside or they don't really fit into sort of like the normal passive things, it's great. Just embrace that. Like you don't have to sort of like fit the rules. And I think that also does stem. I'm very similar in that way too. That it does stem, I think, from this like the there's a need to continue learning and trying new things, and I think that, that for me was I never really worked at a corporate job more than about 2 years because I'd be like,
Yep.
"Okay, I did that. I got it. I understand it. What are we doing next?"
Yep.
And so, like, it just had to keep going.
I mean, this is one of the things I know about myself is like I have some of my friends that get into a thing and they go deep and deep and deep and they're fascinated by it. For me, I love playing at the surface. Like I love learning a new thing. Once I've stopped learning the new thing, I wanna move on to the next thing. Like, at the moment, I'm
Yes.
learning drums. I don't know why, I've never had a musical bone in my body, but I just thought, wouldn't it be cool to learn the drums? I don't imagine I'll ever be an amazing drummer. I imagine in a year or two's time, I'll stop and find something else. But it's that, and this is also stems from my love of travel. Like, I love going to new places. I love exploring new things. There's this kind of curiosity. And I think as a founder, you have to have curiosity and you have to have comfort in going to places that are uncomfortable. You know, and actually, I think to some extent, the skills of being a really good early stage founder aren't necessarily the skills of being a great later stage founder, because actually a lot of those founders get really bored quickly.
Right.
They crave novelty, and the first 3, 4, 5 years of your startup journey, I know my journey was novelty. The next 5
Right.
years is kind of processes, and it's kind of, optimizing, and it's kind of often
Yeah.
doing the same thing over and over again. And so I meet a lot of founders that really struggle with the second half of their career because it's being a grown up. It's like having a proper job and, dealing with, and they want to get back
Becoming
into like,
a career CEO is very different than
yeah,
like, "What are we doing tomorrow? I don't know. Let's
yeah.
figure it out."
And this is one of the things that I've got a lot of people in my network who are great at starting things. And I've got a lot of people on my network are great at taking things that I've already started and optimizing. And I think the perfect scalable kind of unicorn kind of entrepreneur has to weirdly somewhere sit in the middle, and that's a real unique thing. You have to love the scaling things, and the getting things off the ground, but you also have to love then building a community around them. There's this idea of like pioneers, settlers, and town planners. And most people
Mhm.
are either a pioneer, a settler, or a town planner. And the great thing about the successful unicorn entrepreneur is they go through all of those phases and they're comfortable in each of those phases, or they get comfortable quick enough.
Right.
So yeah.
There's this idea that I've always been fascinated with. It goes back to when I was a kid. People would ask me, "What do you wanna be when you grow up?" And I would be like, "Oh, I wanna be a detective and a sniper and, like, I would list off, like, all of these different things, and I feel like I've done that throughout my life, which is learning, photography and leading design teams, but also leading development teams and going to get like an HTML boot camp or going to like learn JavaScript or API. And it's one of those that from the outside, in the traditional parent sort of manner, it feels very untethered and you don't know what you're doing. But what's interesting is that as soon as I started Sackless, I now know all of these things, and I'll do
Mm.
the video editing and I'll do the wireframes and I'll lead the website and then I'll also set up intercom and just being able to do all these things almost sort of sets you up, to be able to sort of run all of the different parts of the ship before you start handing them over to someone else.
And I think, interestingly, I think the future of work is going to require more people with that entrepreneurial mindset, because I think from our parents and grandparents' perspective, like I guess my grandparents would have worked in an environment where they would have had a company for life. You go and you start in one company at the age of 18 and you're there all the way through. My
Right.
parents' generation would have had a career for their whole life. Like, you start on the bottom run and you work your way up. I guess I'm starting to be in a generation where you will have 3 or 4 careers throughout your entire life. Like, I was I mean, weirdly, like, I was a dive instructor, and then I was a designer, and then I was a company owner, and now I'm a VC and a coach. And that's partly because, like, industries are getting disrupted at the speed of thought. Like, industries are getting disrupted every generation, every 10 or 20 years. And so for my generation, in order to stay doing something interesting, relevant, I have had to reinvent myself every 20 years or so. I think the next generation are probably going to be even more compacted. They're going to be having to
Right.
reinvent themselves every 5 or 6 years. They're going to have to kind of get used really quickly to AI and have to adopt those tools. If you're a designer now, I have no idea whether the industry of design will be in any way, shape, or form where it will be, in 10 years' time. I
Right.
suspect that Gen AI will massively blow a big hole in a lot of industries. And so you have to have that person, you have to be that personality that finds a thing fascinating, will spend a bunch of time learning it, but will also hold it loosely. And I think this is one. I
Mhm.
meet a lot of people who have a mindset that they're good at one thing, and it's almost like a scary, risky nature to it. It's like, I can never let it go. And if you're
Yeah.
that person who can never let it go, you are ripe for disruption. Whereas a lot of the younger, millennial Gen Z people I know, like I give you an example, like you said it there. Like I know a lot of people who, if I say to them, like, I really need you to go and do a video, their natural response is, I've never done that before. I don't know how to do it. I will have to go and hire an agency to do it, and it will cost a ton of money. And then I go to a bunch of younger people and they'll go, well, sure, I've never done it before, but how difficult can it be? I'll watch some YouTube videos, I'll experiment, I'll play. And you know
Yep.
what? They might not be as good as the amazing agency, but they'll do it in a fraction of the time, at a fraction of the cost, and it will be launched and live. And it's that fear that you need to get over, that fear of like not knowing. But I think it's a web thing. I think, as a generation, there's a whole generation of people who were given iPhones, given tablets, given technology, and just to figure this out. And there's another older generation that were given this technology and they were given a manual and a booklet, and they were told that the only way you could work it out is by being taught. And so,
And
yeah,
get a certification. You need to prove that you have hit a certain level, and then we will
yeah,
allow you to go do this
yeah,
thing.
absolutely. I mean, there's nothing as lower value than a Microsoft certified engineer in my book. I'm sorry for anybody who's a Microsoft certified
No,
engineer listening to this,
I
but
totally get it. But I also, I started the interactive division at an agency in 2000, and the first project manager that I interviewed had just gotten out of school, and she talked a lot about how she had two masters and had really focused on business and project management and things like that. And on the other side, I had not graduated. I didn't. I quit sort of junior year, and I had sort of like already been dealing with the clients of Home Depot and NASCAR and all these sort of things. And in my mind, it just sort of clicked. It's like, but you haven't dealt with a client that is ornery or like goes back on what they said from yesterday or whatever it
yep,
is. And I think it's that sort of experience of just really digging in and like getting it under your
yep.
skin versus someone saying, you have accomplished the test.
And this is actually why I really like the early web. I like the first 10 years of my career because most of the people I met, they didn't have degrees in the subject because there were no degrees in the subject. Like, back in the early noughties, you didn't go and do a web design or an interaction design or a entrepreneurship course. Like you would figure this out yourself. And I think now, and so like I've hired people that have had degrees, but I've never hired people in the tech space because of their degree. I'll hire
Hmm.
people who can show gumption, they can show grit, they can show that they can do the work, they can show examples of design, they can examples of code. I want to, when I'm doing an interview, like I almost don't really look at their CV. I don't care whether you've been to Princeton or whether you've done this course or that course.
Right.
Like, show me the money, show me what you can
Show me the
do.
Figma, show me the GitHub. Like
Yeah,
if you show me those two things and you can talk and walk me through it, I'm all
yeah.
set. Let's start working together.
Yeah, and I think in a way, actually, I'm going to counter some of the things I said before because I do think that kind of sort of pioneering spirit has gone by the wayside a little bit. I do think hiring managers in big tech companies now, they don't know what good looks like, so they hire based on, do you have these brands, do you have these logos, were you a junior or mid-level designer in Figma for 3 years and you jumped to Airbnb, and I'm actually one of the challenges I have with a lot of the founders that I work with is that a lot of founders that I work with aren't makers themselves. They are business people, or they just kind of like have an idea. They've never hired a designer, or they've never
Mhm.
hired an engineer. And so they often have to go for the same signals. It's like, oh, I'm really excited because I've landed this great hire from Meta. And that always kind of makes me feel a little bit, kind of, oh, I wonder what's going to happen here. Not because designers and developers at Meta aren't amazing. There are many that are, but a lot of them are used to working in a really structured environment.
Right.
They
Or
are used to,
slower paced or like
well,
the things you
exactly,
can
yeah.
sort of take and you rely on the whole team
They
and you're sort of one little part of
Yeah,
it.
yeah. They are often not building 0 to 1. They are often iterating on an existing system that's been there for 10 or 20 years. From a designer's perspective, they're not building design from scratch. They're using a really well-established design system. They have a massive kind of brain trust of really experienced people they can call upon if things get stuck. And yeah, absolutely. Like I met a designer from a really big tech company who will remain nameless. He was really frustrated. He's like, Andy, like I've been in this company for 9 months and I've designed one set of logos. Like, and I was like, oh wow, that's not much. And he's like, and when I say one set, I mean like literally like four icons with a few variations. And he's basically saying like, I spend a week designing them. I spend 3 months in going around to all the meetings pitching them. I get feedback. I then come back and spend another week designing them and do another 3 months. And he was like, "What am I gonna say to any future employees, like employers? Like, what have you been doing for 9 months?" "Well, I did this cool thumbs up icon and that's it." And you're like, even if it's gonna be used by billions and billions of people, like you really, really struggle to get volume and the velocity. And so I really try and encourage if you're hiring a first time engineer, sorry, if you're hiring a founding engineer or founding designer or founding product manager, I much prefer people that have come from small startup background or have come from agency background even because
Right.
you're running really fast on limited resources. There's no safety net. There's no one there telling you what to do, and you're used to doing 0 to 1. I mean, a lot of people that hire these amazing designers and developers and product people, and they get stuck because there's no
Yeah.
one directing them.
Well, and I would also throw into that group, I would say career freelancers, because I think this is actually where we're headed too. Like, Ben Hoffman and what he's done with Contra, I mean, Fiverr and Upwork have been the sort of standard forever. And now Contra is just like, gobbling up everything. And I love it because I love the interface and I love their design team. And I love what they do. But what's really interesting is when you find a freelance designer that does that full time. That is bread and butter. And I'm gonna come in. I'm gonna get your requirements really quick. I'm gonna show you something really quick. We're gonna get feedback. We're gonna
Yeah.
iterate on it. We're not sort of sitting around going, let's have a 2 week onboarding and let's talk about sort of like requirements. Actually, the first designer that Valerie's a shout out to Valerie. She's amazing. She and I connected on Upwork. Um, she did the first round of stack list, and basically, I did no wires. We just talked through it in little sessions, and did every single page for a SaaS platform plus mobile. And all we did was sort of like discuss a couple of UI elements here and there. And all of a sudden, I
Yeah.
had 60 boards of everything, and then it was like, okay, what do you want to work on next? And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is just so like it's so
Yeah.
great to go instead of the old waterfall where we sort of like do a requirements document and then we do full wireframes that like the company never looks at, like, and just all that you just get right into the heart of something that can be, developed.
So this is the thing I see. So I'm the entrepreneurs, the founders I work with, they have a vision in their head. The problem is because it's a vision, it's kind of fuzzy and imprecise. And they try and work with an engineer to get it out of their head. But engineers are maybe not as good at kind of articulating. They're looking, they're looking for directions, they're looking for certainty. The code needs specificity. And so even though there are amazing developers out there, like it's often can be quite a challenging situation for founders to talk to engineers and vice versa. Often they bring a product manager, but again, that's not quite often doesn't quite right, like particularly early stage. I think an early stage founder with a freelancer could be a match made in heaven because that freelancer is able to take what they're thinking, articulate it visually, point it back to them and say, is this what you mean? Is this the flow
Right.
you mean? Like when you say you want something to be easy like this or easy like that. When you say that
Right.
you want it to be seamless, whatever it is, and you can do that really quickly. What might take you weeks and weeks in code can take minutes or hours in Figma. And so what I tend to find is if you're able to find a great freelancer that work with you for the first 6 or so weeks, as you sort of hinted at, the amount of volume that that designer can produce in your backlog can then give you 6 months worth of backlog for your engineers to deal with. So,
Yeah.
like, you don't need to hire that full-time designer because actually what I tend to find is after that initial 6 or 8 weeks or whatever, that designer ends up kind of trying to find work for them to do. And the last thing you want is like a bored designer trying to like throw needless things at an engineering team that's already busy. So I
Right.
love like, 6, 8 weeks, a really good mid-level designer that is okay at UX, okay at visual design, but also good at UX design. Like you don't want somebody that's just an interior designer that makes things look pretty but have no substance.
Yeah.
And you don't
A
want
passion
somebody.
for product that
Yeah,
uses things and
yeah,
and references like, the thing on Airbnb when it drops down, like that, or,
yeah,
if we go to like Upwork, we go like this sort of, and you start getting into that piece. And you're right, because you could basically also, as someone who bootstraps, to be able to do that and do it in 2 week chunks, you come out for like, I'm just making this up, but like, this is not what we did, but like 6 grand or 8 grand, whatever it is. I now have 60 screens that can be developed. And when I find a good engineer to do it, I don't have to do requirements. I go, can we start on this page? And they go,
yeah.
okay, sounds great.
Yeah.
Like,
Well,
and then
that's
you're
the
good
other
to
thing.
go.
If you've got a good designer, you don't really need a PRD, a product requirement document. You don't need a product manager, because what tends to happen is if you've got a product manager, it's almost like the telephone game. The founder tries to articulate, or the game where you try and touch a thing and, is it an elephant? What is it like? With a blindfold. Like the founder tries to articulate it. The product manager then tries to articulate it more in language. And then the designer just basically ships what they're told to ship. If you take that translation layer out, and the designer is visually translating, and like I say, showing a thing and saying, "Is this what you mean? Yes, no."
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. You can move really, really fast. So yeah, I always try and encourage that of the founders I support. Definitely.
I also think with a designer, a good designer, when you find one, having too many requirements, we funnel straight into like, I'm just going to sort of do what you said here on the page. If you start from the high level vision of just like, show me a couple of sites you like and show me interactions you like and things like that, you sort of, it's, it's I with designers I've worked with, I know that have said that this is just the most fun moment. But like, by starting with file new and there's a blank slate, is the most fun part of being able to be like, I could make this any, like, I could make it new and different. I could make this something that people haven't seen, but instead of like drilling into like, it's got to look like this, it's got to be like this. And so that sort of like letting someone go free first while you're
Mm.
still in ideation mode is kind of a beautiful moment.
And I think it's useful for your non-design sort of literate founders to kind of talk about the kind of, just to really quickly define the kind of design I mean, because I meet a lot of founders whose impression of design is making it look pretty. It's like, I will figure out how the thing works. The engineer will figure out how the thing works, and then you put a gloss in it, and you make the corners on the button look nice, and you pick a font, etc. Like that's most people's view of design. It's interior design. It's making a space look pretty. But I would argue that, like these days, with AI, excluding AI, there's very little sort of technical advancement that happens in a product. What the difference between the product you're building now and the product you're trying to detopple or destable is usually the user experience. It's
Hmm.
usually that it's not the unique features you've built, but it's how those features interact. It's how you get from place A to B. It's like how the jobs to be done that you've identified get done. And
Yep.
I think a lot of the time, founders and engineers think in a very logical, methodical way. And when you look at the interfaces that come out of that, they make sense, but they're not nice to use. They're not quick to use. Often things are stored in different places. You have to jump to 3 or 4 different screens. And this
Yep.
is a kind of experience that people are jumping away from. People are looking at products that were designed 10 years ago and saying, I really hate it because my product does X. Not because it doesn't have this feature, because you can do features really quickly, but it's like, I really hate the way that when I press this button, it goes to the wrong place, or
Yeah.
it doesn't remember X, Y, Z. And so the designers I'm talking about are much more like architects. They are thinking, who's going to live in this house? What's their lifestyle? What are their preferences? And I'm going to create a building that's going to be perfect for them.
And what
And
happens when I move room to room? How
e-
does that feel? And
exactly.
does
Yeah.
it flow?
Are you a cook? I'm going to build you the best kitchen possible, where all of your tools are where you need them, and you don't have to run across the kitchen to get rid of garbage, or it's like you are optimizing an experience. It just feels delightful,
Yeah.
and that is one of the big things that will make people switch. It's removing friction. It's creating a delightful product. The other thing, and it's something I talk about in the book a lot. I wrote a book called the Growth Equation, which I'm sure we'll come on to in a second. But a lot of it is around kind of um, figuring out how you can remove the barriers to value as quickly as possible, and how you can get the time down to its smallest amount. And I see a
Hmm.
lot of kind of first iteration products where all the value is there, but it's kind of hidden and it's clunky and it takes time. And a lot of the people just like, I just don't have the time for this. And a really
Yep.
great designer will smooth all the edges. They remove the friction, they remove the unnecessary elements. They will group things together in a way that people come in and they go, oh, I get this. Oh, I get what I can do with this. Oh, I see that how this. Oh, I've actually done the thing. Oh, I've got value. And if you can get value
Yep.
in 5 minutes or 10 minutes, like a lot of the problems I have with a lot of the problems my founders have is they have built products which literally take weeks or months to get the first hint of value.
Right.
And I've helped them get that down literally to minutes. And suddenly they're like, all of their kind of like their charts start hockey sticking. It's all really obvious stuff, but it's all stuff that if you give it a designer will think, well, that's a stupid way of doing it. You have to sign up for a wait list and you have to wait for 6 months or like a month. Then you have to do a demo, and you have to hop on a call, and then you have to fill in a bunch of forms, and you have to wait until it gets integrated. And then 2 months later, you're getting value. And it's like, no, let's self-serve. Let's not put a door slam in our customers' faces. Why do they need to sign up? Can't they just start adding value? Oh shit, you don't need a demo if like your product is there and people are using it immediately. So
Right.
lots of this stuff kind of comes out in the book around the things I've learned over the last 4 years as a VC and the last 30 years as a product person.
I think as a founder, it's also hard when you're diving in and building a product that the things that go through your brain, the legal and the terms and conditions. Have we done mixed panel? Somebody asked me what the what the churn was. How are we doing that? Is Google Analytics enough, or do I need to and you're starting to sort of think about all the different. Someone has to delete their account. You can't have a you can't have an iPhone app unless you have a way to delete your account from the app. How do I charge people on Stripe on the web, but I also do it and so there's all these pieces, which sometimes gets really hard to also focus on that first 60 seconds of I come in and I'm just going to do a couple of really basic tasks. And I think for us, there was a period where you came in and you kind of try and build at least the model of the whole house, but
Mm.
then it's about just pivoting and going back to those handful of few moments and trying to figure out how to sort of reduce that friction.
I mean, and again, there's a few really interesting things there. So I think, again, I think a lot of founders and a lot of engineering-based founders think of the mechanics of this, and you're right. There's lots of things that need to be done. There's lots of things that need to be built. We're chasing this idea of feature parity, like all these more sophisticated products in the market. We have to get up to the level that they're at before anyone even can consider us, and then we need to do more. So we're constantly sort of adding features. We're in this sort of like feature delivery mindset. Um, and that is important. I'm not saying we can't do that, but I guess the way I kind of think about it, and often the advice I give to founders is as quickly as possible, they need to have swim lanes. Like, and it can start with allocating. So basically I have this idea effectively. There are two things your product team need to do. They need to deliver new capability, which is all the new features. Like I couldn't do
Mhm.
this on the platform before, and now I can. New capability is massively important, and new capability is a thing that most founders are thinking of. They're having conversations with other users, and users are always going to say, "I need it to do X," and so that's a capability that you then turn into a feature. So capabilities are important, and the bulk of your engineering team will be building capabilities. The bulk of your product team will be doing that. But then you have accessing the value that currently exists. We are so focused on delivering new value, we don't realize how difficult the existing value is to actually get. And so I think you need a separate team. And that separate team could just be a designer and an engineer. Or it doesn't even need to be a team. It could be like we're going to do 2 sprints of value creation or 1 sprint of value
Right.
extraction. And you just need to flip between the two. You need to go, okay, well, we built all this value, but can people actually get at it? What are the barriers in the way? What's slowing them down? What's confusing? What's weird? What's not working? Let's make sure that the value we've got is accessible. Because basically, if people can't get the existing value, adding more value isn't going to help. You're just kind of
Right.
making more problems. And so you've got to kind of have this balance, and there's a bit of a dance. And so and also people have different mindsets. A designer or an engineer that's trying to think about where the product will be in 9 months' time and what are the feature set for this more complicated ICP we're iterating to is a very different mindset from someone that thinks in iteration, that thinks in a test-based kind of thinking. It's like, okay, we've got this product here. We're expecting, a activation rate of 30%, but only 10% of our customers are activating. What's going on? That's not
Mhm.
additional value. What it is going we're not getting the maximum amount of our value we've got here. Let's run a bunch of tests to see how we can move from 10% activation rate to 15 to 20. If you move from 10 to 20%, you are doubling the value you're putting in your marketing pipeline. You're doubling the value of your sales. Like that is a very, very small amount of investment you need to make to double everything that's happening upstream. And so finding these crunch points and solving them has so much more impact than just adding another feature.
Right. Yeah. I would love to I'd love to pivot to that moment you made the transition, you've been a founder a number of times, and then, sort of before we get to the book, going from founder to VC and coach, what was the sort of period in there when you founded a few different things, and then you sort of made that jump into VC and investment?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a little bit unusual as I'm a VC from the agency world, and that doesn't usually happen. Like the vast majority of VCs, to be honest, aren't are finance or legal people because obviously there's a lot of that that goes on in VCs, term sheets and managing a
Hmm.
portfolio. Of the operators, the people that have actually worked in house, it's usually founders who have been moderately successful, not so successful they've got a new life, but kind of they've worked with the fund have really liked them. Their company may be sold for, low tens of millions. They're not ready to kind of do a new thing yet. They're not ready to retire. They want to help the next generation. So there's a lot of people in the world that or very senior CPOs or very senior kind of marketers or HR people, because obviously startups have real trouble in the early stages finding talent and figuring out product. I come from an agency background, partly because when I started my agency 20 years ago, I really, really wanted to work in with startups because startups are cool and fun and sexy. But all the work I was doing were really big companies. Now, like actually quite envious. Like we worked with Virgin Holidays, Virgin Atlantic, British, all the British big energy companies, the BBC, Channel 4, like
Oh, wow.
br- brands that like are really, really well known in the UK. We redesigned like Penguin Random House. We
Hmm.
took 50 separate imprints and boiled them down into a single website. This was like a Amazon level of kind of project. So we worked with some brilliant brands. But I love the kind of the startup world. All of my friends in San Francisco were redesigning Slack and designing Duolingo, and I wanted a piece of that. But the UK startup scene was really quite tepid. That at the time there was really only like one seed stage fund called Seed Camp. And so I got to know them literally their first year. I offered my services up as an advisor. And so I would come into their C Camp week as a bit like YC at the time. You'd do pitches, you'd sit and kind of advise startups. And I did that 1 year, 2 year, 3 years. I built up a really good relationship with the founders, the GPs, the general partners at the fund. And so we just got on. The idea was it would be biz dev that I kind of end up doing some work with these startups. Startups don't want to hire agencies. Startups want to build an in-house team, so it never worked. But I
Yeah.
just kept on coming back and sharing my knowledge and experience, and we did end up doing lots of work with Californian sort of startups, but not really in the UK space. Um, and I would come and talk at their events and just be around. When I was wrapping up my agency, I sold it, and I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, and so I just reached out to Carlos, the general partner, one of the general partners at CCAM, and said, "Hey, Carlos, I haven't spoken to you in a while. Just left my agency. Just thought I'd have a chat." And he's like, "Well, I know you, Andy. I know you're really good at product stuff. You're really well known in the design space. Why don't you just come and spend a couple of months with us, kind of as a entrepreneur in residence? We can't pay you, but there's not really, you don't have to do a lot. You just have a couple of calls a week with our portfolio companies and just help them out with product related stuff." And I just thought, hey,
Mhm.
sounds great. I can stick EIR on LinkedIn. There's like a prestige around doing a VC thing, and I can do that while I'm figuring out what happens next. And I loved it. I loved talking to these early stage startup founders. I love the energy. I love the enthusiasm. I loved the leaning into all the different industries these people were working with. And it turned out that my knowledge of building a business from naught to 30 or 40 people was exactly the spot that these C stage companies were at. You know, um, knowing sales and knowing how to do outbound marketing was exactly the stuff that most of these product led founders were bad at. But
Mhm.
most importantly, getting product out the door and reaching product market fit was something I was excellent at. And so, like after a few months, when or 6 months when my kind of EIR finished, like Carlos came back to me and said, "Look, Andy, people love you. They really love working with you. They're getting a ton of value. Do you want to become a partner? Do you want to join the fund?" And I was like, "Hell yes." And so I'm a venture partner 2 days a week. It's not full time. But I spend about 20% of my time at Camp doing pre-investment. So talking to potential investments, hopping on calls, being pitched at, a couple of pitches every week, and trying to decide whether these are companies we think are worth investing in. But mostly 80% is once we made the investment. I look after a portfolio of about 12, 16 companies. I have a call with the founder every couple of weeks and we just help them. And there's there's a really obvious journey. The so what typically happens is a founder has a vision for a solution that's in their head, and they pitch that to a bunch of VCs, and one or two of them says, "I love that vision, have a bunch of money." And so their first mental model is, "I'm just going to ship the thing I promised,"
Right.
and nothing will shake them from shipping that thing. The designers will go, "I think this is a bad idea. It's not going to work." And they're like, "I don't care. I've got money. I'm shipping the thing." The engineers will be like, "But what about X, Y, Z?" And I don't care. I'm shipping the thing. Even like most founders are smart enough to know they're meant to do customer discovery. But even customer discovery, what happens is I talk to a bunch of customers and I'll say, "This is what I'm building." The customers who say, "That's brilliant," gives me confidence I'm on the right path. The
Right.
customers that say, "That's a terrible idea," I go, "Well, they're idiots. They don't know what they're talking about." Because I've raised a bunch of money and I'm building this thing. And so, like, the first sort of 3 or 4 or 5 months is literally just getting the thing that's been burning inside the founder's head out and into the world, you know? And that is difficult. Like, birthing anything to the world is really tough. And so I can understand why there's, like, no bandwidth for pivoting and changing and kind of like, because you just wanna get it launched. And also, we know that, like, it's much easier to get something in the world and then see how it's used.
Right.
What typically happens is most founders get that thing in the world and they sit back and say, "This is gonna be big. This is gonna be huge. People are just gonna come flooding in." And they open the gates and then no one comes. Or a couple of people come, but they don't really like it. Or they come and they use it, but so this expectation of like this thing is amazing and everyone's gonna love it, it withers on the vine. And so then it's like, okay, I need more features. Throw more features, throw more features, throw more features. And it's this idea of the next feature fallacy. Every feature you throw at the thing, you think is going to be the thing that's going to catch fire, but it never does. Um, it's like throwing damp logs onto a campfire. Like it just
Right.
doesn't take. And at some stage, people will go. Hopefully, the smart founders will go. This isn't working. I need to do something differently. And it's that point where they think that they need to do something differently. It's not just features. I need to figure out why aren't people grokking this thing.
Mhm.
Maybe people aren't getting it because they don't actually understand it. Like the positioning is off. Or maybe, like I say, the value isn't being delivered quick enough. And so it doesn't bake into people's habits. People kick the tires, they sign up for the thing, they do the demo, but oh, I've got to have all this information to sign up and I don't have time now. I'll do it 2 weeks later. And then 2 weeks turns into a month and they go back to their old way of doing things, which in SaaS is usually some kind of shitty spreadsheet.
Yeah.
Um, and so none of this stuff bakes in. And so they start fixing that. They fix the positioning and more people come on board. They fix the onboarding and it starts to take off. They get the value, time to value down from, 2 sessions to 1 session to 10 minutes to 5 minutes. And suddenly everything starts picking up and things are rolling. And that's how they start to realize, oh, I need to, you know, the things that the people said to me that I was doing discovery that I discounted were actually the blockers, and I needed to listen to them more. And the
Mhm.
thing that the designers and engineers were saying, "Are you sure that we should do it like this?" Actually, they had a point. And so you start actually, rather than just being a concert leader, telling all the musicians what to do, you start gelling as a team and you start making beautiful music and everyone's contributing and it's working really, really nicely. And that's the thing I love. And so the first stage is getting that team working and delivering product and inching ever closer to product market fit. And then you've got to figure out sales and marketing. You've got to find the customers to use it because it doesn't matter if the product's great if no one's using it. And then, once you get people coming and kicking the tires, you can learn from them. And then you start hitting product market fit. And then you start thinking about like who are the right people on the right team? What are the skills I need? And then lastly, as a founder, it was easy when you were running a team of 5 people. But now you're running a team of 20 or 30 people, things are breaking down. People are having
Right.
arguments, things were flying 2 months ago and now everything's bogged down. Like you try and like free things up by being really dictatorial, but rather than that helping, people are now like having a go at you for being a pain in the ass.
Why wasn't
And
I invited to the meeting? Because Bill was invited to the meeting? Yeah.
exactly. And so what I do as a VC is I solve all those problems. It's a Maslow's hierarchy of need. I start with getting the product out, and then I start with iterating the product. Then I start with helping them build a pipeline of work, go to market strategy. Then I help them sort out the team. Then I help them sort out their culture and their style as a leader. And usually that takes about 2 or 3 years. And that usually is taking them from pre-seed to seed to Series A. And when they hit Series A, things are flying. They've figured out the product, they've figured out how to sell, and then it's just a scaling problem. And usually that's somebody else's problem. Usually the Series A, Series B investor will take in and go, okay, like Andy, you've been great at scaling a team from 0 to 30. I'm now brilliant at scaling a team from 30 to 200. And it's a
Right.
tag team. And so that's my sweet spot. That's where I add the most value to the people I work with.
That's gotta be so much fun, especially going through the process yourself and doing it and then being able to help, but not even just help back to the sort of many lives that we like to live. You're actually living so many lives through these companies, that I also imagine that is that sort of where you also turned, to speaking and coaching and writing the book,
Uh,
was coming out of some of these experiences?
to some extent, yeah. I mean, I've been speaking for 20, 30 years. Like my first ever conference talk was at South by Southwest 2005. And I've spoken at hundreds of conferences since, and I love it. I love community. I love spending time with people. That's why I love speaking at podcasts and meeting folks like you. I just get a real buzz off of talking to people and helping people. I learn so much. Every event I go to, every person I speak to, I take something away. And we talked at the right start of the show. The desire to kind of learn and always be improving. The other thing is that like if I am building my own business, like I can impact a smaller number of people, but
Mhm.
if I can help 10 designers build 10 products better, if I can help 10 founders, 20 founders build 20 products better, if I can help a room full of people, you know, improve 100 or 500 or 1,000 products, my impact is greater. It's diluted because I'm only helping them a little bit, but I'm helping more people, and I really get a kick off that. And so that's why I speak at conferences. That's why I love the VC work, and that's why I kind of wrote the book as well, to kind of take this knowledge and experience and get it as widely distributed as possible, so I can have a big impact and just make better stuff. We've all lived in a world where they've been frustrated by technology. Why doesn't this exist? Why is this broken? Why does this work the way it does and not a better way? And so if I can get more people removing all that friction and frustration, then I've had a good impact and I've had a good career.
Amazing. Well, and speaking of the book, I have it on the Kindle and I'm starting it, and I'm starting into it, so I'm really excited about that. From the book's perspective, what's the ideal moment, the ideal person, and the ideal moment to sort of absorb what's in the book?
Yeah. I mean, that's a really good question. So a lot of my friends are experienced founders. And when I was writing the book, I wanted to get their view. And the view was basically like, this is the book that I wish I'd read at the start of my journey. Like all the stuff in the book, absolutely agree with. These are all things that I had a huge amount of pain learning. And like, it took me 5 or 6 years to figure this stuff out. And if I'd have read the book, it would have taken me 2 years. And so the real kind of ideal is like the start of your founder journey. Like brilliant would be a little bit like Lean Startup. Like if you read it before you even wanted to start a startup.
Right.
The reality is that most people won't think like that. Most people will read it when they get stuck. Like the book is called The Growth Equation. It's all about early stage startup growth. It's all about how you can ignite that fire of growth. Find your first 10, 100,000 customers. Get your first 10, 100 million ARR. All the things you need to get up to kind of seed stage and beyond. And so what I typically find is, as I said before, like founders are really singular. They think they know the right answer. And so they will forge ahead. They won't want to read a book like mine at the start because that will get in the way of like building the thing. But I think the book is best is like you had an expectation that your product would be growing at a certain rate, but it's stalled. You know, the product is out. The company's 6 months in, the product's launched for 3 months. You thought you'd be at 50 MRR now, but you're at five. Your VCs are breathing down your neck. You're gonna have to raise in 6 months' time, do your seed stage. How do I unlock growth? And when you
Mhm.
hit that problem, when you hit that growth problem, you're gonna hopefully reach for the book, like my book, and go, okay, this book will help me figure out what's going on. It's kind of like um a a sort of a a sort of a tool for understanding where your growth is stuck and kind of unlocking that growth. And so
Mhm.
that's kind of where I think most people will get it. It's like things are slowed down, things are stalled. I'm not where I need to be. I'll reach for this book and I'll and probably flick through some of the chapters and be like, is my problem around, acquisition? Yes or no? Is it about, go to market strategy? Is it about sales and marketing? Or is it about product related stuff? Is it onboarding, acquisition, retention, pricing? Like I tackle all of the kind of the main kind of like stumbling blocks that my founders have struggled with. And so it might be you just read 2 or 3 of the chapters and you're like, okay, this is the bit in the book, this is a bit I'm struggling with. I will just lean into this. And what typically happens is people unlock that bit and then something else in the value chain breaks and like, oh, I saw that other thing in this book that I will go to that next chapter. So yeah, it's really about kind of unblocking those growth inhibitors, I guess.
Amazing. And what would you say for a founder if the founder opens it up and is sort of midway through their process? What are the sort of 2 chapters, 2 topics that you would say to sort of focus in on, or the 2 that would maybe be the most impactful, especially in the first 6 months?
I mean, so I'll answer that, but I'll step back a little bit. So I call it the growth equation because I've kind of got these sort of 7 arguments or facets that I think have an outsized impact of growth, positive and negative. And I break that down into kind of like product related and market related. And this is important because I find that there are kind of 2 kinds of founder archetypes. The vast majority of founders are product makers and builders. They're really good at the product stuff. The thing that they really lack is the go to market. They struggle with sales, they struggle with marketing, they struggle with like catching fire. And so
Hmm.
if you're a product related founder, then it's the 2 or 3 chapters at the start of the book all about like how to unlock sales, how to market properly, how to get people into the system. Because also you can't iterate and improve if you don't have enough people. If you've got 5 customers, all of your experiments are going to not really show anything. If you've got 50, 100, 200 customers, you want to get a cohort of new people coming through. And sadly, I think a lot of product focused leaders think, oh, marketing and sales is somebody else's problem, like growth is somebody else's problem. And they hire somebody, they hire an SDR or a salesperson, it doesn't work out. They hire a
Right.
marketer, it doesn't work out. And usually out of frustration, they go, well, I better do this myself. And I guess my focus is like growth is your primary goal. Like, like you can build a backlog of product features that you can give to your team that they can be driving forward. You have to get into the uncomfortable space, the stuff that you're not good at, and that is probably growth, and that is probably sales and marketing. So yeah, if you're a product person focused company, it's the sales and marketing bits of the book that are really important. And then obviously the other way around. I do meet a smaller number of people that are charming and charismatic, and they could sell ice to Eskimos or Inuits or
Yeah.
however we frame it, but they just don't understand that, like, they've got all these people coming to their system and it's not sticky. People are not signing up, they're not activating, they're not getting value, and they struggle. And so if you're that kind of business focused person that you're wondering like growth is stalled because it's a product problem, then it's the product chapters of the book that are really, really important. So it's kind of, yeah, it's a story of 2 halves.
Nice. I love that. I love that way of approaching it. What's one thing right now that you're just like on fire about, that you're excited about, that you wake up you're just like thinking about it, or that you're working on?
I mean, it's a slightly weird thing because it's not to do with my day job. But I recently, as I think I sort of alluded to, maybe I recently started to learn to drum, and so I'm really getting into the drumming, and so I'm finding myself sitting at the table and sitting in the car and just kind of my mind is doing that thing. And I think partly because it's quite a handy thing to do with your hands. Like you don't have to think. You can kind of just be absorbed into this sort of like flow state. And so I'm really enjoying that. In terms of the startup world, I mean, again, like I'm loving the book, I'm loving the feedback I'm getting. I just love working with founders. And so like if the question was like, what's one sector that's exciting you? I can't really do that. It's a bit like saying like which of your kids is your favorite or which of your school kids is the smartest. Like
Right.
I'm a bit of a kind of an absorber of things. And so like weirdly the most exciting thing at any one time is the person I'm talking to in that moment. You know, if someone is really excited about a particular technology, like this is a weird thing. Like for me, in the weirdest kind of way, the products I like the best are the kind of the boring products. Like, like I've got a lot of people in my portfolio that are innovating in e-commerce logistics or reordering or like, and these are things that I wouldn't at the first thought go like, this is a really exciting space.
Right.
But because it's seemingly boring and also because it's seemingly hard, people don't touch it. It's like, this is too big a problem. Like, I'm gonna do another, like, um, AI chatbot or kind of, NFT or whatever because I know how to do that. Like, the really kind of big, messy, dull problems, when you actually get into them, are fascinating. And so the
Hmm.
the products that I'm finding that are getting the most traction are like, this is an industry that hasn't been touched for 10 or 15 years. Most of them aren't even, they're still, doing things on paper or spreadsheets. and I am bringing all the things I've learned with this new technology. I'm bringing AI, I'm bringing predictive kind of, like engines into this thing. I'm taking an industry that like the old guard are retiring and the new people in it are used to being brought up on tablets and iPhones. They want an
Hmm.
amazing customer experience, and the thing that we're delivering them is really resonating. And so, yeah, like, I'm geeking out on logistics and e-commerce returns. I invested in an e-commerce returns company recently. It's like, you know, returns sounds really boring, but once you start diving into it, it's like there's some really great stuff going on here.
Complex
So
machine. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, it's weirdly and it's getting hyped about other people's like weird niches. Like in a way, like that's what you want when someone's pitching. Someone's pitching and you feel that they're not even interested in it, then it doesn't matter. But if they're like geeking out over thing, it makes you think maybe there's something I've missed here. Like these
Hmm.
people are so energized and enthusiastic about something that seems quite dull. And then you get drawn in and you start realizing this is not dull at all. It's just it's complicated and kind of geeky. So yeah, it's that kind of stuff that really excites me.
Amazing. Well, I love that, and I love the fact that you love sort of going deep, and into the machine and working with your founders on that. That's amazing. Um, well, this has been great, and I really appreciate you coming on, and this is such a fun, great conversation of just really getting into the nitty gritty of how to solve those problems and design, and I think this is it's one of my favorite topics. So I appreciate you coming on and sharing.
It was absolutely my pleasure. Lovely to connect. Lovely to talk about this stuff. As you know, I can talk about this kind of topic to the cows come home. So, yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure.
Awesome. Have a good day.
Thank you. See you later.